Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Dan and Amy, and so the debate rages on, as you would suggest. The left wants to make the Alabama pro-life law a 2020 election issue, particularly as many conservatives are debating whether or not that law went too far and risks undermining the prospects for overturning Roe v. Wade and returning the matter to the states in the next 24 months. People telling their stories. Stories are important. Our friend over at the Radiance Foundation, Ryan Scott Bomberger, on this matter of rape incest exceptions. My biological mother was raped, yet she rejected the violence of abortion. I was adopted and loved instead. I'm not the residue of the rapist, quote unquote, as one Alabama senator described those like me who were conceived in rape. I couldn't control the circumstances of my conception. Could you, Senator? My birth mom needed an active healer in her life, not an activist huckster. As an adoptee who grew up, wanted, and loved in a multiracial family of 15, and as a happily married adoptive father with 4 children, I'm here to say there's another side of this painful issue. And we've had Ryan Scott Bomberger on the show. As I mentioned, he's excellent. Mm-hmm. Really, really good. The flip side, Sarah Jones, writing in New York Magazine, abortion is morally good. A fetus is a possibility, not a person. While abortion can be the tragic end to an unwanted pregnancy, it's never murder. The opposite position is extreme and a threat to the health and safety of women. There is no compromise, not on the personhood of the woman. You can't find middle ground. Invite them into your big tent, and you threaten the most vulnerable people inside it. So how much middle ground is there? I know there's a lot of Americans who are pro-life with exceptions. And there's maybe a few Americans left who honestly are pro-choice but believe it should be safe, legal, and rare, as the slogan went. And I think it's gone. I don't think that's really the position harbored by the pro-abort left, certainly not when you're passing pro-infanticide bills in places like New York, trying to in Virginia and Illinois.
So, because my lefty friends kept asking, why all of a sudden? I go, because of infanticide, because of the bills that you're passing in New York, the one that's, I think, on the table here in Illinois,
yes,
and other places.
Yeah, that's right. And
that's why.
And in these other states, what's New York doing? Voting their shares. Pro-aborts are voting their shares. So why shouldn't pro-lifers in Alabama and Louisiana and Missouri and Ohio and Georgia, why shouldn't they vote their shares? They're duly elected the same way the pro-aborts in New York or Virginia are duly elected. But it is a good discussion. We started it yesterday with May Reed McCardle. We talked a little bit about last week with David French, and talk about a little bit more. David Harsanyi, who's written on the topic. David Harsanyi, of course, our friend from the Federalist.com, senior editor there. He's also the author of the book First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. David, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you and David French, just for easy handle, sort of on opposite sides of the Alabama law in terms of its political utility. And so I just want you to lay out the case that you laid out in the Federalist and the concerns you have.
Well, I mean, philosophically and morally and in every way, I agree that rape and incest doesn't change. Cases of rape and incest do not change what a baby is. I don't think compounding one tragedy with another is the right thing. But I do wonder if getting into that debate is worthwhile when we can actually be saving kids with laws like in Georgia and elsewhere that are less, that it can actually be enacted and enforced in a better way and save lives. So it's sort of, I guess I'm making an incrementalist argument about it, and I feel that Alabama I feel that the pro-lifers have been winning in many ways, and maybe perhaps not always legally, but in the larger argument you have Democrats defending people who are talking about infanticide and passing bills that allow abortion, after birth almost. So it is something that I think, just as a political matter, perhaps isn't wise.
But don't you think the Alabama bill is too extreme and will not overturn Roe v. Wade when it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court?
I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I worry about that it will not, and that it will maybe even strengthen Roe. Those things worry me. I don't think it's I'm pro. I mean, as a secular person, I'm completely pro-life, and I don't think that it's extreme as a matter of law. I just think it's extreme in a matter of perhaps taking a jump too far for people right now.
There's the some suggestion that more likely be the Louisiana law that makes its way to the high court. But the whole point of, again, voting your shares, to continue using that device to describe this, is you want something that forces the court to make a decision on the underlying issue rather than just allow for another exception under the Casey standard. Courts are always predisposed to be incremental, and we're looking for something that forces the court to say up or down on Roe v. Wade as good law.
Right. Well, and people have said that, and maybe that's true. I mean, if you look at what was that case in Colorado with the baker, everyone celebrated that as a victory for religious freedom, but in truth, it had nothing really to do with the underlying questions involved. So maybe you want to make sure that doesn't happen here. And if Roe is overturned, people automatically assume abortion will be, banned everywhere, but they'll just be given back to the states, which I think is the best political answer to this question. So I'm all for that. I just think that in the end, even if whatever the court says, whatever laws say, you have to convince people that that abortion is a barbaric practice, and in the end, you need to do it legally, but you also need to do it in other ways. And I'm slightly worried about the other ways. I mean, I'm not offended by the Alabama law, but I'm just not sure that it was the right thing to do. But there are good arguments that there are, and David French, for instance, made them. So
I wanted to pick up something that you wrote about very nicely last week. I mean, you were all over it. And it was Rashida Tlaib's invention of the last 80 years of history, her ahistorical take on Palestine, the Palestinians, and the state of Israel, and what Palestinians did or didn't do during World War II and the like. And then, of course, Seth Meyers following up and giving her a platform to amplify her ahistorical views.
He's her spokesperson now.
We have her. We have Omar with her noteworthy anti-Semitism. And we have Ocasio-Cortez, whose latest crusade is against colonial cauliflower in the Bronx. Those three, can those three sort of offset any concerns people have with President Trump, despite or irrespective of who the Democrats nominate in 2020, do you think?
Well, in one way, they're not very helpful, but in another way, they probably represent a growing and important faction within the Democratic Party. So I think it's fair to use them as straw men in a way, because I think they do represent that faction, the Women's March faction, things like that. So I don't know how important they are. I know that they rile up people on the right, so in that way they're important. And I do think you see, with Nancy Pelosi, for instance, fighting over the impeachment thing, that the far left is more and more important. And another thing about those three is that people run to their defense all the time. It'd be one thing if they were just ignored, right?
Exactly.
Like Stephen King or something. But no, people rally to their defense and defend the things they say. That is, I think, much worse than even what, not what they're saying, but even, their power within the party.
Well, that we misrepresented what she said, and that we owe her an apology.
Well, that's right. We talked to Caroline Glick from the Jerusalem Post last week, and that's the point she made. Hey, Pelosi and Hoyer may not be anti-Semitic, but they're running cover for anti-Semites, and that's a problem, and that's something Jewish voters and all voters should consider. The demanding of an apology, as Amy just said, and the like, is really the political crime here by those. Yeah, well, two things. One was when Nancy Pelosi decided to water down that initial anti-amendment resolution about anti-Semitism, she backed herself into a corner. Now she has to defend this woman every time
She really has not much of a political choice. And people like Hoyer are just complete and utter cowards who immediately couch the mob who tells them that that's not what they give them the line that she was just trying to bring people together and all that, then demands other people to apologize. I mean, it's absurd, and I don't know that this ends well, for Jewish Democrats who are going to have to make a choice at one point.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Jan Schakowsky and others. Really,
she's too busy with Omar decrying white nationalism.
Oh.
Yeah, she doesn't have time for the anti-Semitism. Doug Shane, who's a pollster writing in The Hill, since you've written a book on the topic, gun control must be a central theme for Democrat candidates in 2020. And he's not necessarily even taking a position on the underlying policy debate. He's just saying in terms of the political power of gun control in the wake of these attacks on schools and places of worship, this is an opportunity maybe not to go full nuclear like Eric Swalwell, but to advocate and to federalize the issue of gun control. How concerned are you about that being a wedge issue for Democrats? And I should say specifically with Republican women who could very well decide President Trump's fate.
I don't know that that's an issue that people vote on, meaning I don't think they're going to change their vote because of gun control. I always felt like that issue is something that really animates people on the right, some people, and animates some people on the left. I think most people have mixed views about guns in society, and they're not going to, I don't know that that's a driving issue that changes votes. I mean, he's a pollster. Maybe he has, information that says that I'm wrong, but I just don't feel that that's what happens. And every time one side, these days, pro-gun people don't do anything, but if the gun control folks move forward, it does more to animate people in anger than it does to make them want to vote. And specifically because there's really no law that could stop these people that they're proposing. I mean, other than just taking away everyone's guns, which isn't going to happen.
He is David Harsanyi, senior editor at thefederalist.com, author of the book First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. David, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Yeah, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.